All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Kate Vanny and I work with URI Alumni in a career and advising engagement aspect at URI's Foundation and Alumni Engagement Office. And I'm also a proud alum. We have a great alumni panel in store for you this evening. Our alumni panelists will address various matters that have influenced their career journeys over the years, as well as share their professional insights. We will have a mock career conversation as an example of those that take place on our alumni career mentoring platform called URI Career Connect, as June is Flash Mentoring Month in our office. Many of our panelists were recommended by faculty that spoke during our spring faculty office hour series on clean water, which you can find on our YouTube page. We're delighted to be able to connect the dots from the academic experience of our faculty to the career paths of our alumni. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. I'll keep an eye out on the chat and the Q&A box for any comments or questions that may come up. And towards the end of the panel, we'll open it up for Q&A. This program will be recorded and is going to be posted on our alumni YouTube page. So I'll get started with some introductions. So first we have Ken. Ken Burke is an Associate Director of Capital Projects for URI, where he coordinates the planning, design, and construction of transportation and major infrastructure projects. He oversees all other construction projects at the Kingston and Narragansett Bay campuses. He's a professional engineer of over 25 years experience in the public and private sectors, serving on local boards, commissions, and nonprofits. Next, we have Dylan. Sorry, help me out.
Eberly.
We reviewed this too. I'm so sorry. Dylan Eberly is a professional scientist with Geosyntech Consultants in Massachusetts. His expertise is in site characterization, litigation support, innovative remediation technologies, and emerging contaminants. Then we have Jordan Feldman. She is a fairly recent graduate who works as a student services coordinator for the School of Science at RPI. She's worked in environmental consulting, the nonprofit world, and even completed an AmeriCorps term on Cape Cod. And finally, we have CJ Speltman. He is an environmental engineer for Narragansett Bay Commission, which is the largest water waste authority in Rhode Island. He has studied novel green treatment methods for drinking water and wastewater. So thank you all to our panelists. Let's jump into the conversation. So as someone who maybe studied within the field, it's always interesting to hear the journeys of others, which we refer to as career maps. So let's start off by briefly hearing each of your career maps, maybe starting with your journey at URI through your various experiences and what led you to where you are now professionally. Ken, could you start us off?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Kate. I mean, I'm locally grown here in Charlestown, so I really didn't go too far to get to the university. I did spend a little time in the Marine Corps and decided I wanted to get my education. So came to URI, civil engineering program. That basically was a platform for me to be an intern with the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. Enjoyed doing that, working in their bridge inspection group. Eventually went into their highway design group, and that's where I started working on water supply or water resource issues, mostly on permitting. After about 7 years, I had an opportunity to be the director of public works for the city of Cranston. That was a wonderful opportunity, much expanded responsibilities. We had a regional wastewater facility there that we upgraded, improving water quality in the bay. We were able to sell effluent to a power plant up in Johnson, so we had an effective reuse of what was otherwise seen as kind of a nasty discharge to the bay. I then left and went to the town of Westerly. I was a town engineer and public works director for several years. Different engagement, smaller community, but that's when I really started getting a little more involved in terms of water supply, drinking water supply, taking more time to think about on-site wastewater systems, creating the town's first on-site wastewater system management program. After Wesley, I did some private work with a national hotel firm for a few years. And then I had a wonderful opportunity with the Rhode Island Water Resources Board. That's when I really kind of brought things full circle for water resources management. I led that agency for about 7 years, created a master plan for water resource use in the state. And most recently, the home run here, I was able to ditch my car, buy my bicycle, and I work about 4 miles from the university. So I love working here at URI. We've got a ton of great work going on, water conservation. We've got some interesting water supply projects planned, and that's the path that I'm on.
Thank you. CJ, did you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm probably the most recent URI grad. I just finished my PhD in last summer, 2022, after getting my master's in 2020. I started at URI in 2018, so I got 2 degrees during COVID. So I'll pat myself on the back for that because it was rather difficult, especially doing laboratory research during the pandemic. After graduation, I took a job at the Narragansett Bay Commission, which is where I am today as an environmental engineer. NBC is the largest clean water agency in Rhode Island, which means wastewater. So we serve about 1/3 of the state's population. And also, as of like last week, I was also just hired by URI as well as a postdoc. So I'm back working with the university part-time to help give back to the community that helped me, and I can help push along the next generation of grads from the civil and environmental engineering department.
Wow, taking classes during COVID. That's amazing.
And teaching them too. So it was I got the double whammy: take classes during COVID and teach classes during COVID.
Wow. I can't even imagine. Dylan,
Sure.
thank you.
So my journey starts sort of with my undergrad. I went to Bates College for my undergrad, and I actually started taking geology courses because I didn't want to take chemistry courses as my basic science requirement. I fell in love with geology, but one of the things I also realized studying geology there that I really was interested in the problems of now, which is very much environmental geology. And we really didn't have a hydrogeologist in my undergrad, so I knew right off the bat I needed to get a master's degree at the least and study under a hydrogeologist. And that's what got me to URI, where I began as a master's student in Tom Boving's lab. That master's turned into a PhD. And one of the real highlights of that was watching sort of the project change. We started with one project, and then in particular, PFAS emerged as a major topic. And we sort of realized that a field demonstration we had planned was actually going to be very PFAS related, and very quickly pivoted and got additional funding to do some research on that. That has then led to a career in consulting, where that initial PFAS experience has led me now almost 8 years at Geosyntec Consultants to apply that background I developed at URI and sort of turn into one of my firm's leading PFAS experts. And so that's sort of been my story. And so my time at URI and some of the unexpected experiences really shaped the direction where I ended up.
Thank you. Could you just quickly speak to the problems of now that you mentioned?
Oh, certainly. Geology is the study of the earth, and the earth is very, very old. And I think that stuff's awesome, but I am very interested in contaminated site remediation, water treatment, problems of that affect humans today. All of this is foundational and built on folks who are studying deep earth and things of that nature. But the questions I'm interested in is contamination from this site reaching this well? How much? And if so, what types of remedial options should we consider? I also do a lot of litigation support where there is a lot of finger pointing, and can you prove scientifically whether or not something originated with a specific potentially responsible party or not. So it's a lot of that here and now, and how humans and the way contaminants migrate in the environment come together.
Thank you for clarifying. And Jordan?
Yeah, I'm Jordan. I graduated in 2019 from URI with my bachelor's in geology and geological oceanography, as well as my graduate certificate in hydrology. I have a very different path than the rest of the panelists. I've done a little bit of everything. So while I was at URI, I started off as ocean engineering and quickly realized there was a lot of responsibility that comes with engineering, and I wanted to have a little bit more to do with clean water availability, conservation work, that type of thing. And so I found Ann Vieger before she was Associate Dean of Cells. If that's still her title, I'm not even sure. But she was a hydrologist and she said, oh my gosh, you should go do all of these things that are hydrology related because it's a lot of fun. And boy, was she right. I took every class that Tom Boving and Sony Pradhanang offered. I worked in Sony's lab. I worked for the cooperative extension and went around to farmers markets telling people about all of their well water issues and what they should do to kind of keep everything clean. That eventually made me fall in love with community outreach. Sorry, something just fell. With community outreach. And I ended up, after I graduated, going to Cape Cod to do AmeriCorps, where I worked on so many different awesome, fun projects and got to do my service year planting or seeding quahogs and oysters and teaching little kids about water conservation, environmental conservation, working with nonprofits, all of that jazz. And then COVID hit and the AmeriCorps term kind of ended. So I moved out to Denver, Colorado, where I started working with a nonprofit out there, ripping out people's lawns and putting in native plants and saying, why are you trying to water the desert? But, you know, people want green lawns. So I was out there kind of trying to do some more environmental outreach and education and steer them in a better direction. And then I came back home. I'm from New York, so I'm back here in New York working for RPI and their School of Science, helping all of their students kind of back where I was way back when to find their way and doing some advising and helping them navigate the world. So that's what I've been up to.
Thank you. I really love how everyone's speaking to their unique paths and their unique experiences. And I think that that's what's valuable in having such like a diverse panel in that way, yet everyone, the root is all the same too. So there's that shared experience as well. Thank you for sharing that. Next, I'd like to segue into throughout your experiences, or maybe even in your role now, what skill set do you find to be most valued in this industry? And what are you seeing that it takes to be successful? So maybe as someone entering the industry or just curious about it, what are you finding from your personal experience? CJ, did you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. And maybe I'll give like more of a non-tangible cliche answer to this question. But I think one thing that is a true skill set, because it's not just, you know, a given, is hard work and determination. Because those two things I think are seriously undervalued, especially by, you know, we'll call them this next generation. You know, you can get as far as you want in both your career and in life if you work towards something and you set your goals and you aim to meet them. You know, especially once you get out of college, the world isn't just going to hand itself over to you. You have to work to get to where you want to be. So putting your nose down, working hard, you know, people notice that, and that makes an impact both on your professional life and your personal life. And if there's any single skill set I can say, it's really just work on getting yourself to work hard, because that'll take you as far as you want to go and it'll never stop paying dividends.
I was just going to say, in terms of the intangible, could you give maybe some concrete examples of what it means to work hard? That could be a takeaway.
Sure. Yeah. You know, there's always, you know, expectation and doing what you need to do or supposed to do, but sometimes taking that extra step, doing a little bit more than what's required, you know, going one step above what's expected of you, you know, that looks good to others, and it also proves to yourself that you can, accomplish anything. So I like to use myself as an example, and I said this when I defended my dissertation. I look at myself, as an undergraduate student who got like a C in their calculus 1 class in college. Like I was like, oh, I'm never going to be an engineer. Like, I'm just not good enough, not smart enough. There's no way that I'm going to accomplish that. And around my sophomore year, I was like, I'm just going to work a little extra hard. I do the homework, I sit for the test, I study the same amount as everyone else. It's fine. Let me work a little harder. And I did that. I kept working harder and harder and harder all the way to the point now I have a master's and a PhD in something I never thought I'd actually even finish a bachelor's degree in. So sometimes working that little extra amount can even change your own perspective on a situation.
Thank you for sharing what that looks like for you as a personal example. Does anyone else want to share a skill set or maybe a trait that they're finding it takes to be successful specifically in this field?
I can totally touch on that.
Thank you.
I would say one of the best things that you can do and have as a skill would be to talk to everyone and anyone, even if you don't think that they're the right person to talk to necessarily. Everyone knows somebody, and they all have very different takeaways on things, and it's always just a good way to kind of practice your people skills. And you never know, you might find someone down the road that you might need to call on, and it's always good to have kind of a good wide network and range of folks. Sometimes your plans change and you're like, oh right, I met this one person at that one conference, maybe I should follow up with them and see what's going on. That's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing.
So I'll start with an abstract one, but then I'll get a specific one. So how to think critically is one of the most valuable things, because, and that's something that you should be trying to develop while you're in school. It's that notion of you don't necessarily know the answer to the question, but you know where to look to find it. You know who to talk to help you solve the problem, and then you follow through on it. And that speaks to that same sort of hard work thing. You're not, when you become a consultant like myself or others, you might have your technical expertise, but you can't know everything. And so you have to know whom, when you're out of your element, when you need to bring in a specialist to support you, how to utilize those resources. And that's the same thing is true at school right now. You need to know you have a lot of resources available, but they're only as valuable as how you choose to use them and take advantage of them. A specific example of this, particularly in my field, is I know that it started up when I was graduating, and I wish it had been an opportunity for me. But there was a spring HAZWOPER course. This is an OSHA training, and it's a brilliant course in that you get to take semester credits and then get a certification that allows you to step onto contaminated work sites and actually perform work. This is massively attractive to employers because they don't have to pay for it. You've already got it. And this sets you up both for entry-level positions as well as internships. It has absolutely been a differentiator when looking at resumes. So that's sort of a concrete example and a more abstract one.
Thank you for.
I'll put some emphasis on that because I also took that course and it has been extremely valuable for me as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely agree, 100%.
Were there any other resources that anyone else on the panel wants to speak to that they utilize specifically for this industry, maybe either courses or anything that they can recall from their time at URI of resources that they tapped into that could be helpful to share?
I can add, maybe not so much a collegiate resource, but listening to everybody speak, I think given the long view of my career path, I definitely concur with everybody's consensus of working hard, being very strong with your convictions, making sure you're in the right industry. That's super important. But over time, I've learned or gained additional appreciation for listening, as Jordan was saying, those people skills. because it's not just a mechanism to, more freely exchange information, but you really start to understand the nuances of all these people that you're communicating with. And sometimes embedded in their perspectives are truths that you just didn't see. As an engineer, I'm very, very linear. I know what I want to do before I get into a meeting, and it's really hard to change my mind. But over time, I've learned to really kind of engage folks and use my people skills almost as heavily as I would my engineering skills. That's been a huge benefit.
I can just add a resource, Career Center. Definitely use the Career Center. They got me an internship with someone in California, which I definitely would not have had otherwise. So Career Center is so great. I love all of them over there.
What was that internship that they helped place you?
Yeah, I got an internship at Langen Environmental Consulting. They're a nationwide company. I ended up in Oakland, California, working with another URI alum, doing environmental consulting. So wastewater sites, air sampling, all of the stuff that we could do basically to make sure all of their gross contaminated sites were getting cleaned up properly and apartments weren't going on contaminated sites and stuff like that.
Wow.
I'll also add too, as a resource that I think is underused, especially by not even just students, but even alumni, is the university faculty themselves. A lot of us, we go to school, we sit in class, we learn from them, and then we leave, and then that's it. But Jordan pointed out the importance of networking. The faculty have such an expansive network because they've been in the field for so long that they can be an invaluable resource, whether you're still in school or you graduated 10 years ago. They're always developing their network, and you never know who they can help you out with. So staying connected and using them as a resource can be so valuable no matter where you are in your journey.
Thank you for sharing that. I heard themes of working hard, networking, critical thinking, utilizing resources that are on campus, and the skill of listening, which I think are pretty transferable skills no matter what field you enter. So that it kind of bleeds into our last question, which is a piece of advice. So if we can maybe pivot a little bit, I think that would be helpful. But if you have a piece of advice that you might offer someone entering this field, or maybe a recent graduate that you could all share, I think that would be really helpful to end on that note before we open it up to a brief Q&A. Jordan, did you want to start us off with a piece of advice?
Absolutely. I would say, don't be afraid to do things that you didn't think would be in your career path. Take the chance to step outside the box of your maybe rigid ideas of what your careers might look like, and say, maybe it's starting at the bottom of a great company and working your way up. Maybe it's not, going for the highest level. There's something to be said about kind of like what CJ was saying, just hard work and showing people what you can do. It's probably the best thing.
Thank you. Did anyone want to add to that?
I could jump in and, in technical careers in particular, and again, as we've been talking, you might bump into people from time to time. I've certainly done that in Rhode Island. You can't help yourself. You're running into people constantly. So staying true to your convictions, having that sound base is always critical, because you'll find yourself disagreeing sometimes, or just being on opposite sides of maybe a discussion point over time. But if those people can trust and value your insights, your knowledge, your training, you can always come back to them later on in your career for whatever reason it is. And I found that to be helpful. I've disagreed with a lot of people, but we've always, parted amicably, and we can resume conversations whenever needed. So.
Do you have any insight into when you are disagreeing with someone either in the workplace or in the field, like how you deal with that professionally?
Very, very carefully. And, and that's just on a personal and a professional level as well, right? So it's the golden rule from, back when we were kids. It stays consistent throughout your entire, career in your life cycle. Just treat people like you'd like to be treated.
Thank you.
So a piece of advice I might put out there, and it's a little broad, but I think it's important to remember that you're at an academic institution, and a darn good one. But the majority of all of us the students will not end up with careers in academia. That the majority of us are not going to do that. And so you need to make sure you're spending time and energy understanding what your degree, what skill will actually do for you in the real world. What are companies actually looking to hire someone with a degree in geology, in civil engineering, in ecology, water resources? What skills are they actually looking for? And what are they looking for with respect to someone who's maybe graduating with a bachelor's versus a master's versus a PhD, so that you are working to build skills and connections that will help you get that position. So making sure that you don't have, I don't know what, academic blinders on, that you are looking forward to the next step and making choices that set you up for success.
Could you speak to possibly skills that you're seeing employers are looking for within the field?
Well, certainly when it comes to looking at taking on, particularly folks with bachelor's degrees, in my particular environmental consulting, we really value field experience. Have you actually sampled groundwater or soil samples, or do you have something applicable? Can you cite, it may be that you went out and took clam samples from a bed and you're asking for a position doing groundwater. But if you can tell me that you can plan an event, you can be outside all day, you can troubleshoot things and take scientific readings, okay, I've got no issues. I can teach you how to pump a well. That's not a problem. You've hit all these major things that I'm looking for. And then obviously, as you get more advanced, if you're applying for a position as a hydrogeologic modeler, well, okay, you should make sure that you've got the appropriate modeling courses. But that's the sort of thing you want to be thinking about. And also figuring out where you don't necessarily have direct experience on something. How does something you do demonstrate that you'll be able to do that? Because again, as a hirer, I don't expect you to have done everything, but I do want to make sure that you have some concept of what the job you're applying for, and can demonstrate skills that show me, oh, I can teach you what you don't know. That's fine. So that's hopefully a little helpful.
We like to call those transferable skills.
That would have been a great buzzword for me to have had. That's so much more succinct.
Well, no, you gave a little bit more of an explanation to it, which is appreciated. Does anyone else want to add anything else to this part of the conversation before we move to some questions?
Sure, I'll add just one thing, and it's a piece of advice that my graduate advisor instilled on me, which was, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. At no matter what point in your journey you're at, whether you're towards the end or just starting, there's nothing wrong with admitting that you don't know the answer to something. Life isn't, you have a lifelong opportunity to keep learning. And if you don't know something, that's an opportunity for you to learn something new. And then once you learn that, you'll know it the next time. So just because you don't know something, that's not, a knock on you or your education or your experience. It's more of an opportunity to learn something new from someone who may have had a different background and experience than yourself. So just, sometimes we get in our shell and we don't want to say, I don't know, because we want to pretend like we know everything or everything we should know. Oh, I graduated with such and such degree, I'm supposed to know that. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. And that was a humbling experience for me to, wrap that up and realize, like, okay, it's okay to say that, because this is an opportunity to learn and grow, not a knock on my knowledge. So that's one piece of advice I say to anybody, no matter where you are in your journey, is just don't be afraid to say that phrase.
Putting ego aside and finding the information and admitting it.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
at the end, you're just going to end up better anyways. So there's no point in trying to protect an ego that you're not really protecting anyways.
In that spirit, is there a need or a requirement for continuing education for your degrees or for this industry?
There can be, depending on where you go. So in terms of formal continuing education, I know, so I work at a wastewater agency. So those that are, operators at our facilities, they need to have some continuing education to increase their licenses. I also just recently passed the professional engineering exam. So that required studying and classes and test taking. And then depending on which state you're registered as a professional engineer in, you may have to do continuing education courses. And then there's also, even if you don't have a certification necessarily, there's benefits career-wise to getting professional certificates or taking, webinar courses, that may relate or introduce you to some concept that you may or were not aware of, especially nowadays in this post-COVID world where everything is done virtually. You can listen to a webinar with 1,000 other people from around the country and you don't know what insights you might get from that.
Yes, very true. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your pieces of advice. We're going to move to the Q&A section. Jordan, you specifically have a question from the audience. This person would like to know, what kind of challenges have you faced in the field? How did you overcome them? And do you have any specific examples?
So many challenges in the field. Gosh, and I've done so much different field work. So it's hard to know what realm they're talking about, but I guess I'll just go broad. As a woman, you get those kinds of challenges when you're out in the public talking to usually older guys who see a young girl who they think might not have the background to be talking about technical scientific information. And with that, that was a challenge that I faced probably at least once a week and just had to be ready for. And it was kind of a combination of learning how to stand my ground as well as picking and choosing my battles. That's a big one to learn, is when to speak up and really say something and when to realize that you're just not going to change someone's mind and get on with your day. And then there's the physical stuff of just like being out in 110-degree heat in Colorado and ripping up lawns, which was, very daunting and difficult, and learning how to take breaks and sit down and listen to my body when it was tired and needing water and snacks and electrolytes and all of those things. And just like everyone's kind of said, learning how to say, I don't know the answer, or I can't do that physically. I can't lift a 100-pound rock. I'm really sorry. Lots of things, but there's always someone else who can help. And as long as you learn how to ask for help and having the right people in your corner, you can just about overcome anything in the field.
Thank you for providing those specific examples. It's always great to hear, in my experience, from a woman's perspective, especially when you're on a panel of all men. And I don't know how the field dominates, if it dominates more male dominated, or if you see women equally represented in the field. I'm not sure.
It really depends on the field, I think. I think there are a lot of male engineers, just speaking from some of our panel, and then education is a little bit more female dominated. And then I'm in a weird spot where they really overlap, and it's kind of everybody. So it just depends on what you're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else who is viewing this panel, this webinar, feel free to submit your questions. There should be a Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen for some more questions, because we still have a few minutes before we wrap up. If anyone else wanted to throw questions out to our panel. We'll give a couple seconds. All right, I'm not seeing anything else come through. I know we were scheduled through 6:15. If you wanted to give any last remarks, feel free.
Well, kind of a serendipitous one, but there were some comments earlier about making sure that you keep your network together and you make these connections, because you never know when they're going to pop up again. I'm looking at Kenny and realizing that I think we played soccer together when I a grad student here. And then I probably need to follow up with him because I've got some questions about some of the upcoming projects that I think URI is moving forward on. So that's an action item for me. But I think that also just points out to you just never know when something's going to come full circle.
Especially
it's a small world in water resources and engineering in general. So don't burn any bridges if you don't have to.
Never mind in the state of Rhode Island.
Yes.
One last question just came through. It's a little bit broad, but I don't know if you wanted to speak to this or someone else on the panel. Someone would like to know, they would like to know what they need to do to get involved in the water industry. So again, that's a little broad. Not sure the angle you'd want to take.
Well, answering it, I mean, certainly water resources is a very broad field. There's a lot of different specialties and things in that nature. But there's also a lot of collaboration across those disciplines, particularly in engineering firms, things like that. You'll often have sort of action groups within a firm or a company that collaborate. So I guess the first point is you got to know what you want to do. And then you need to, one of the best things you do is find people who are doing it and reach out to them. Informational interviews are excellent. I'm shocked how little I actually get contacted by people to inquire, because one of the best things you can do is, there have been a couple instances where, well, I'm not actively hiring now, but I'm happy to talk with you. And suddenly at the end of it, we're putting together a requisition for this person to apply to because they really knocked our socks off. So just because don't necessarily wait for companies to have positions available. Go ask them about what they do, and you might end up having something to apply to. Maybe that's kind of helpful.
Don't be afraid to cold email. I cold emailed so many organizations and I got 2 internships that way, 3 internships that way. Like, just do it. I know it's scary and daunting, but the worst thing that they can do is not answer you. So
That's how I got into this field also. I blindly sent out resumes to people for internships when I was in undergrad, and one of them just happened to be a wastewater treatment plant, and they said yes, and then here I am, and that's my career. So yeah, cold email is definitely a good way to go, but you can't go wrong. At least the worst thing that can happen is they don't answer. And you know what? Then you just keep asking. And I'll just add too that, working in the water industry doesn't mean you have to be an engineer or a scientist. For example, Narragansett Bay Commission, we're a clean water agency, and we have, engineers like myself. We have scientists who work in a lab. We also have operators. We also have accountants. We also have attorneys, and all of them are all working towards the same common goal of clean water. So just because you're not an engineer or a scientist or don't have that background doesn't mean you can't do something to contribute to the water industry, because there are a lot of opportunities, no matter what your background is, to contribute. And one of the ways to learn that is to, again, talk to folks in the network. And, again, speaking from my wastewater background, come talk to someone at one of these agencies. You know, most towns, cities or towns have, or they do have a wastewater treatment facility. You can ask to go for a tour, and on a tour, talk about the type of positions that they have and the type of career paths. You know, that's one example of how you can actually learn about the field, learn about the careers that are available, and also just a way to build a network.
So cold emailing and visiting kind of leads into this next question. If anyone has any advice for how to network or find jobs in a different state that you're planning to move to when you're not currently local. And this person provides a quick example that they're a URI alum, but having been living and working in New York for the last 7 years, they're planning to move back to Rhode Island, but don't have a professional network there.
I mean, I could jump in. I think as we're talking, like Jordan has suggested, you know, emailing, just if you're in a technical field, there's a good chance you're somewhat of an introvert, but the more you push yourself, the more reward you're going to get. And honestly, it gets a lot better with time. But there are professional societies out there. There are trade societies out there. They meet quarterly, they meet regularly. And again, if you're talking, and this person is referencing coming from New York all the way over to Rhode Island. I mean, Rhode Island is small. There's a good chance if you could go to one of those meetings, you're going to see people just like CJ and Dylan are talking about. You're seeing not just in the water resource supply industry, you're seeing the accountants, the legal, the vendors, suppliers, and they're going to be talking about a breadth of topics that you might just lock onto, and you'll be in that same room. And they want people that are interested in these topics, their careers. So reach out, do some quick research online. It's not that hard. The hardest step will be, as Jordan says, just cold email or call somebody and buy the ticket. Go meet them.
Someone also mentioned LinkedIn as a resource to build your network. And I just dropped in the chat that our online mentoring platform that I mentioned at the beginning, URI Career Connect, everyone on there has put their hands up to meet with you to help build your network. And you never know who people could know and put you in touch with. And that's a virtual resource, so you don't physically need to be anywhere. So I encourage you all on this call to get on that platform for if you're looking for advice or willing to give advice and guidance to alums. We highly encourage that, especially during June, our Flash Mentoring Month. So we'll end on that note. So many great takeaways, courses to take, throwing yourself in there, field experience, listening, networking. Really, really valuable information. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. This has been great. We did record this, so in a couple days, maybe a week, we'll have it up, this recording, for those who are asking for it. It'll be on our YouTube page. I can also drop that link in the chat. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. Have a great night.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.